It begins with a knot. Not just any knot, but a snarl of bark and rope so tangled that no one alive could remember how it had been tied. In the heart of Phrygia stood an old ox cart, chained to a post, its yoke bound by this knot that legend said no man could ever untie. And yet, the story promised, whoever did would rule all of Asia. For centuries, it was little more than a folk tale, a challenge meant to frustrate ambitious men who fancied themselves chosen by the gods. Then, one spring day in 333 BCE, a young king from Macedonia, barely in his 20s, strode up to it. His name was Alexander. Onlookers gathered, whispering. Here was a man who had already defeated Persia in one battle, a prince turned general with a growing reputation for daring. They expected him to wrestle with the knot like countless hopefuls before him, to pick and pull until sweat soaked his brow and frustration stole his patience. Instead, Alexander looked once, smiled, and drew his sword. With a single strike, he split the knot in two. The crowd gasped. The prophecy was fulfilled, though not in the way anyone had imagined. To Alexander, the solution was simple. It wasn't about following the rules of the past, but bending them to his own will. That act became the perfect symbol for his life. Alexander's legend often feels like a story already written by fate. But to understand how he reached that cart in Phrygia, you have to look backward, to a boy restless under his father's roof, growing up in a rough northern kingdom far from the polished cities of Greece. Macedonia was no Athens, no Sparta. It was a frontier land, mocked as half-barbarian by its southern neighbors. And yet it produced a king who would carve his name into every corner of the ancient world. That path started not with swords and battles, but with a childhood shaped by ambition, education, and a father who refused to be ordinary. The knot may have been sliced in a single moment, but the boy who grew into the man who cut it had been forged over years of training, trials, and expectations. And to see that, you have to step into the halls of the Macedonian court, where young Alexander learned that greatness wasn't optional, it was demanded. Because before he was the Great, he was just Alexander, son of Philip, and his childhood was about to be anything but ordinary. You step into Pella, and the floor of the royal courtyard is powdered with dust the color of old bone. Spears thud against round shields. A trainer's reed lashes air. Boys your age miss their mark and bite their lips. Men twice your age pretend not to care who's watching. You do care. You are Alexander, prince of a country the polished Greeks call rough and half wild, and your father's shadow stretches across every wall. Philip is the storm that broke Macedonia's enemies. You are the lightning everyone keeps glancing at, wondering when it will strike. Morning begins with leather, boots tugged on tight, the belt cinched, the smell of oiled straps. You run until your legs burn. You throw until your shoulder aches. You learn the names of every muscle because here a prince is not a silk-robed ornament, he is a blade in the making. At table you are taught to sit straight, to speak boldly, and to listen harder than you speak. The men around you weigh each other the way hunters weigh a boar, by scars, by sinew, by nerve. You take it all in. Even as a boy you keep a straight gaze a heartbeat longer than courtesy allows. People remember that. At home, two forces pull you. Your father drills loyalty into your bones. He is missing an eye, but he sees more than most men with two. He remade the army, made spears longer, ranks tighter, pay regular. He filled the halls with victory banners and the air with plans. Greece, he tells his friends at wine, must be one fist. You are expected to clench. Your mother, Olympias, is a different fire. She is from Epirus, where mountains loom and stories stand taller. She loves fiercely, praises loudly, and warns you not to be ordinary. People whisper about her devotion, about rites and serpents and gods who walk into dreams. You don't know what the gossips know, And you don't care. What you know is this: when your mother looks at you, she sees more than a prince. She sees destiny, and you learn to look for it too. Your first tutors are not gentle. Leonidas watches your plate and your posture with equal suspicion. He makes you carry sacks of grain up the hill and then scolds you for breathing like a bellows. He sneaks hands over your bedding to make sure you haven't smuggled extra blankets. Hard beds make hard men, he says. He is a stone you must sharpen yourself against, and though you bristle, you sharpen. Another tutor, Lysimachus, is softer. He calls you Achilles during games, and you answer to it like it is your real name. Heroes creep into you that way, through play that doesn't feel like play, through praise that tastes like a dare. The palace is a crossroads. Ambassadors come through with honeyed words and hidden knives. One afternoon, Persian envoys in long, shining robes arrive while Philip is out. You are a boy, but you refuse to be a toy. Instead of asking about the court or their king's jewels, you ask about roads. How long from Sardis to Susa on a good month? Where are the mountain passes narrow enough that a small force can stop a larger one? How many men guard the bridges, and how deep is the water beneath? The envoys glance at one another, their smiles stiffen. Later, when Philip hears, he laughs, but it's not a soft laugh. Someone says, he asks the questions of a conqueror. You don't deny it. Macedonian life makes you tough the way a river polishes stone. You hunt boar in brush that snatches your tunic and tears skin. You learn to smell rain before it falls. You share bread with the young nobles who will one day be your officers and your family. Hephaestion among them, quiet-eyed, sure-hearted. You begin to build what your father is building, but inside. A phalanx of friends, shoulder to shoulder, that won't break when the world presses in. Then comes the horse. A massive Thessalian stallion, black as a moonless night, its name a rumor of thunder, Bucephalus. Men can't get close. He rears, bites, throws even seasoned riders. The price is outrageous. Philip's officers snicker at the merchant for bringing a demon to market. You watch. You don't step forward. You watch. The horse's ears twist and his eyes flash whenever his own shadow slides over him. Fear. That is the knot no one else noticed. You walk up slowly, take the reins, and turn the animal so the sun falls full in his face. The shadow shrinks behind him. You run with him until his muscles listen to your voice, and then you are on his back, and then the world is wind. When you return, breathless and grinning, Philip kisses you, not like a father, but like a general greeting the man who arrived with reinforcements. My son, you must find a kingdom equal to you. Macedonia is too small. That sentence brands you. It is praise and pressure, blessing and burden. You feel it later at banquets, when wine flows and voices rise, and men shout over victories already won and victories not yet dared. It glows in you when bards recite the old lines from Homer, the anger of Achilles, the cleverness of Odysseus, the long road of heroes. You listen with your jaw set and your eyes bright. The tales plant themselves like seeds in your ribs. You don't know it yet, but a teacher will come who waters them until they crack the soil and reach for the sun. Growing means learning the map of power as well as the map of the land. The court is a living thing with nerves and jealousies. You are a prince among seasoned commanders who have bled for your father and expect to be paid in honor. You must be bold without being reckless, confident without being careless, visible without being vain. You practice speaking plainly, giving and taking counsel. You memorize faces the way you memorize mountain passes. A narrow look can be a choke point. A thrown cup can be a skirmish. A toast can be a treaty signed with breath. And always the training yard, the thud of a sarissa butt in the earth, the rhythm of feet in formation, the moment when a line of boys moves as one creature and the ground seems to pulse under your soles. You love that feeling,
the disappearance of the self into a shape larger than you, and the return of the self made larger by that shape. You don't want to be a part of history. You want to be the shape history takes. You start to test the edges of your world. When Philip rides out, you take commands suited to your age and push them a hand's breadth farther than expected. You're not reckless, though many will later call you that. You simply see a path and take it before the dust has time to settle. Even your play becomes prophecy. With your friends, you stage mock battles and argue strategy with the seriousness of men twice your years. After one of these games, an older captain shakes his head. "You were born in armor," he mutters. "But you weren't. You were born in a place that doesn't let you forget why armor exists." At night, the palace cools and the braziers whisper. You sit near a lamp with a roll of stories spread across your knees. The words light your mind like a field catching fire. You want the world to be big enough for what you feel in your chest. You don't want borrowed glory or second-hand fame or a crown that comes already dented with another man's victories. You want to make the map flinch. Soon enough, someone will arrive who can show you how to think like a king and ask questions even sharper than the ones you asked those envoys. He will bring not a sword, but something more dangerous, a way to cut confusion into clean lines. When he comes, the courtyard dust will still be there, the spears will still thud, and your father's shadow will still stretch long. But after him, you will no longer live in that shadow. You will learn how to carry your own. And that begins the day a quiet man from Stagira walks into your life, holding tools that look nothing like weapons, and turn out to be the most powerful weapons you will ever wield. Because before you conquer others, you must conquer your mind, and Aristotle is waiting in the wings. He arrives without a trumpet, a quiet wedge of thought pressed into a noisy court. You are still the prince who rides Black Thunder and asks ambassadors about roads, but now a man from Stagira steps into the light and changes the way you see everything you thought you already knew. He is not tall, not armored, not loud. He brings no banners and promises no swift victories. He brings questions. He brings a habit of asking why, and then asking why again when the first answer tries to stand on its dignity. His name is Aristotle. Your father gives him a school and a sanctuary, a place of cool stone and running water among the nymphs at Mieza. There, under vines and cedars, lessons do not start with remember, but with look. You sit with a circle of companions, boys who will one day have names carved on coin and stone, and watch your teacher draw the world out of what seems ordinary. He turns a leaf in his fingers, shows you the veins are not chaos, but pattern. He holds a shell and hears proof of invisible mathematics. He opens a fish and says its organs argue a case, form serving function, life thinking with flesh. Aristotle asks you to name things, parts of a bird's wing, parts of a sentence, parts of a state. Once you name them, he shows how the parts fit into a whole and how a whole can be broken without breaking forever. He walks you through logic like a soldier guiding you through a tight pass. Premises are rock, conclusions are the road, fallacies are ambushes. He does not scold you for wanting glory, he scolds you for wanting it without reasons that can stand up when kicked. You copy lines until your fingers cramp, not because he loves drudgery, but because his mind is a mill and paper is grain. You learn the kinds of causes, material, formal, efficient, final, and discover you've been using them in battle games without knowing the names. Why does a spear thrust work? Not only because you practiced, efficient, or because the shaft is ashwood, material, but because a straight line meets soft flesh faster than a curve, formal, and because the end, victory, tells you what to value, final. Everything you touch begins to answer to this music. 4 notes, one mind listening. He makes Homer new. You already loved the Iliad as a song of thunder. Aristotle asks you to listen for the grammar between the drums. What makes a hero admirable? What makes a city fail? Why does rage rule a man, and how can reason climb back onto the throne? He edits a slim, clean copy for you, the casket book you keep within reach like a knife. At night, wind humming through the sanctuary, you read by lamplight and find yourself in Achilles' stubborn glare and Odysseus' careful tongue. Your teacher does not tell you whom to be, he teaches you to weigh the cost of being either. He does not live only in scrolls. He walks, points, tests. If we say nature does nothing in vain, he asks, touching the rib cage of a goat, what work is this bone doing? What can survive without it? What cannot? You ask the same question of people. If a city is a body, what is its rib cage? Law? Custom? Oath? He builds in you a habit of comparison you will never unlearn. Campaign as anatomy, empire as ecology, language as architecture. He teaches medicine enough to help you save men you love when no physician can reach them. He teaches rhetoric enough to bend a sullen army back into marching. He teaches the map of human wishes, wealth, honor, safety, pleasure, and the way a leader can rearrange those wishes so that men choose long roads when short ones tempt. Most of all, he presses one lesson like a seal into warm wax. Excellence is not a gift that drops from the sky, it is a habit, made of choices repeated until they become your nature. But he also carries the world's limits in his satchel. He calls Greeks the ones fit to rule and others fit to be ruled. He believes mixed marriages make muddled souls. You listen, nod, and argue inside your skull. The teacher's categories are clean. Your life refuses to be. You have seen Thessalians who ride better than any Athenian talks. You will meet Persians whose courtesy is a kind of power. You already sense that a kingdom stitched only with contempt will rip at the first hard tug. The seed he plants is not agreement, it is friction, the spark that will light your later experiment, welding peoples without flattening them. He praises balanced constitutions and warns that a city drunk on equality falls into confusion, while a city drunk on one man's will falls into fear. You memorize the warning because you feel the pull of both kinds of drunkenness inside your chest. He shows you how laws grow from character the way fruit grows from a tree. Change the fruit, he says, and you haven't changed the tree. Change the root, and the fruit will follow. You file that away for days when you will change uniforms, coins, languages, and still need something deeper to hold the empire together. In the afternoons, you and your companions argue in shade as cicadas hiss. Hephaestion asks if the good life is contemplation or action. You say action feeds on contemplation, and contemplation survives on the grain action brings. Ptolemy asks if stars push us or merely mark our going. You answer that either way, a wise man reads them. Someone asks if a king should be a law unto himself. Aristotle lets the question sit, ripening, and then says, if he's law-like, if his soul is tuned to the good, then his rule will be the measure of law. But if he is only appetite with a crown, then nothing could be worse. The lesson installs itself in you like a compass, and later you will check it when wine and praise threaten to tilt you. He takes you to the riverbank and kneels to watch ants haul crumbs. Telos, he says, end, aim, purpose. And you realize even these small lives strain towards something. He points at your men training in the distance and says the same word. What is their telos? To keep you alive? To keep each other alive? To make your name a rope that pulls their sons into safety? He asks until you feel the answer settling into the way you'll speak to soldiers before dawn. He's not naive. He knows passion drives men onto roads reason alone would never pave. So he teaches you to make passion serve reason. Pageantry not as vanity, but as grammar your army can read without schooling. Mercy not as weakness, but as a wedge that opens gates iron cannot. Anger not as law, but as heat you borrow and return. You feel your mind turning from a blade into a toolkit. And yet, for all the thinking, the world beyond Misa keeps knocking. Rumors ride in with traitors, new tactics tested by your father, new alliances, new trophies set up in temples. The sanctuary feels like a calm harbor, and the sound from the open sea is getting louder. Aristotle finishes a diagram, sets down his stylus, and looks at you as if he can hear it too. The lesson is almost over. The campaign is almost begun. When you finally leave Misa, you carry more than notes. You carry a way of seeing that will braid itself through every decision still waiting in your path. How you found cities that speak to both Greek mind and Persian heart. How you judge counselors who flatter and those who warn. How you hold the Iliad close, yet rewrite the ending so rage does not rule you. But habits of mind, however sharp, still need an army to swing them. And while you were learning to untie arguments, your father was forging something far more solid than words. Because, as you fold the casket book and mount Bucephalus again, you can feel a different rhythm through the reins, the measured thunder of a new kind of army being drilled to perfection. To understand the power you're about to inherit and the cost it will demand, you have to step out of the grove and into Philip's parade ground, where ideas become spears and patterns become marching feet.
Philip is not a dreamer. He is a carpenter with a war chest and a ruler's eye. You watch him measure a kingdom the way a builder measures a beam, testing for rot, shaving bad wood, driving fresh pegs where the frame sags. When he took the throne, Macedonia was a cracked house between mountains and sea, pressed by Illyrians, mocked by Greeks, picked at by Thracians. In a handful of seasons, he makes it tight, straight, and dangerous. He learned in Thebes, hostage turned student, studying the men who broke Sparta. He comes home with their lessons sharpened and his own improvements ready. Start with the spear, not the old kind that stops at a man's height, but the sarissa, so long it looks like a young tree stripped of bark. He drills farmers until they can hold that length steady, two hands locked, shields small and tight, ranks close enough that one man's breath hits another man's neck. The point is simple. Don't fight like scattered heroes. Fight like one animal with 1,000 iron teeth. The phalanx becomes the anvil. To swing the hammer, he shapes you and your companions, the hetairoi, into a heavy cavalry that moves like thunder rolled into hooves. Between them, he tucks a band of quick, fierce foot, hypaspists, to guard the edges where battle frays. He adds archers from the hills, slingers from the coasts, and engineers who can build engines of wood that throw stones farther than a boast can travel. Combined arms, he calls it without naming it. To you, it feels like a song where every part hits on time. He pays for all this with mountains, specifically with the veins of silver and gold near Pangaeon. He takes a small settlement called Crinides, pumps life into it, and calls it Philippi. Coins with his face spread like seeds. Pay becomes regular, service becomes a job. Suddenly you can keep men under arms year-round, train them through winter and feed them in spring without gambling on chance. Money turns loyalty from a gust into a wind at your back. Diplomacy is another tool on his belt. Where others declare friendships, he marries them. Illyrians to the west, Thessalian ties to the south, Epirus to the northwest, and Olympias, the mother who lit your sense of destiny, knotted into that web.
Later, in a move that will make the floor of the palace tilt under your feet, he'll take another Macedonian bride and set an argument smoldering. But for now, you see how marriage becomes a treaty that shares a table and a bed, and how handshakes sealed with wine become garrisons sealed with stone. He doesn't just break enemies, he breaks the map. Amphipolis, Pydnea, Potidaea, names that once meant Athenian footholds now mean Macedonian tax in timber. Olynthus tries to hedge bets, Philip cuts the hedge to the ground. In Thessaly, he rides in as savior against tyrants and rides out as ruler with Archon on his seal. In Thrace, he sets forts like nails along the routes he cares about most and leaves commanders who know their jobs and their paydays. He puts men where grain grows and where roads pinch. He does not love glory more than to reign. War under Philip is not a rumor, it is a calendar. Spring marches, summer sieges, autumn treaties, winter drills. The new army learns to pivot as one when he whistles, learns to feign flight without truly fleeing, to lure a proud line forward and then spear it to the earth. You study his hands on campaign and see how little he leaves to chance. Scouts ride far, pioneers cut roads, bridges appear where mornings find rivers in the way. When a city believes its walls are taller than fear, the engineer arrives with towers and rams. When the towers stall, sappers burrow like moles under foundations until stone sighs and slides.
You are not watching from a window. You are inside the machine. As a teenager, you hold a command on the left wing at Chaeronea, where Greece tries to stop your father's rise with a last proud stand. The Theban sacred band, lovers fighting shoulder to shoulder, plants itself like an oak in the field. Philip feints, flexes, gives ground on purpose. The Athenian line stretches to chase him. A gap opens where impatience has tugged a seam. On that cue, you drive the companions forward and hit the brake in the cloth. The oak snaps. Later, men will point to a stone lion and tell stories about that day. Some will say they saw you shine. You carry away not a boast, but a proof. The machine works, and you can drive it. What follows is not a victory lap, but a craft. At Corinth, your father binds Greek cities into a common peace, a league with rules that punish wars between neighbors and point all sharp tools in one direction, east. He is named hegemon, leader, for the campaign all Greeks have counted and recounted at their cups since Marathon and Salamis. Take the fight across the water. Cut the Persian route that has shaded Greek pride for generations. Claim payback and prizes in the same gesture. Committees are formed. Quotas are set. Ships are discussed along with oaths. The war begins to exist on paper before it exists in dust. At home, the court thrums. Philip's table is a workshop where jokes are tests, toasts are traps, and favors are forged in the heat of long nights. Officers who carry scars sit beside newcomers with sharp cheekbones and sharper tongues. Poets hover, cynics pour, flutes blur the room's edges. In this place you learn a second kind of drill, how to endure a slight without giving it a crown, how to spot a future friend inside a present rival, how to ride an insult like bad weather and arrive dry. You also learn how quickly a joke can become a wedge that splits men who look unbreakable in armor. Philip, all the while, keeps carving. He standardizes gear to make resupply simple. He assigns battalion names and honors you can touch with a hand, not just hear with an ear. He understands that men will march farther for a symbol than for a coin alone, so he gives them both. Oak reefs, purple-edged cloaks, and pay counted on schedule. He hires men who can read ground like script and others who can read faces the same way. Where he cannot win with smiles, he leaves a garrison behind and lets time do the convincing. He is not just your father, he is the whetstone your ambitions rasp against. Sometimes sparks fly. You believe in honor won in open fight. He believes in any tool that works. He bends with events like a reed. You try to stand like a spear. You admire him, resist him, copy him. He teases you for loving old heroes. You surprise him by turning those stories into steel. He tests you because he must. He trusts you because you pass. The machine he built fits your hands, but it is still his. And when you grip it, he watches to see whether you will crush it or carry it. Then, with the League assembled and the first troops already ferrying across to Asia under Parmenion, the carpenter begins to draw the grand line on the map. A strike through the Hellespont, a road of victories leading to Susa, Babylon, Persepolis. He schedules sacrifices, arranges marriages to tighten loyalties, plans a festival to let the whole nation see itself as one body stepping forward. The mood in Macedonia shifts from preparation to promise. You can feel it in the marketplaces and the barracks, breath held, eyes east. But a plan is a bridge dreamt on land. Before the first full marching song can echo on the Asian shore, a cut appears nobody measured for. In a theater bright with celebration, in a city dressed for a wedding and a war, a single blade slips where no spear ever did. The machine jolts. The house he built goes silent, waiting to hear whether the beam has cracked or only groaned. Because in one heartbeat, the man who made Macedonia into a fist is gone. And now every eye swings to you to see whether the hand will still close.
The day begins with trumpets and ends with a silence so heavy you can feel the dust settling in it. AG is dressed for joy, garlanded streets, bronze catching light, a theater thrumming with expectation. Your sister, also named Cleopatra, will be given to your mother's brother, Alexander of Epirus, a marriage to weld families and polish alliances. The kingdom is a single drumbeat. Your father is in his best mood, the kind that makes courtiers stand straighter and rivals swallow their vinegar. He has just turned Greece into a single spear aimed east. He has plans that stretch from the Hellespont to horizons you haven't yet seen. And he wants the world to see him walking toward those plans with the crown steady on his head. He chooses to walk into the theater without guards tight around him. He likes the theater's eyes. He likes the feel of a crowd's breath turning warm as it washes over his bare arms. No cloak to hide a dagger, no cuirass to make a point about danger. He is Philip, who bent the map by will and craft, and he believes the day belongs to him. You stand within the rim of noise, tasting the sweetness of roasted offerings in the air, the salt of nearby tears. Weddings always pull old stories from people's eyes. The procession moves, images of the gods passing like bright islands. You watch your father come, an easy smile pulling one side of his mouth, his stride, the stride you've tried to match since you were old enough to walk at his heel. The moment feels set in amber. King, festival, empire, coiling to spring. Then amber shatters. A body detaches from the crowd. Pausanias of Orestes, one of the royal guard, rushes in close. The movement is wrong, too fast, too hungry. A flash of metal. The air makes a small, wet sound that only those nearest can hear. Your father's smile collapses into surprise. His hand goes to his side and comes away dark. For a breath, no one believes what they are seeing. The brain refuses to admit that a world built so carefully can tilt on a single blade. Then everything moves at once. Pausanias bolts, guards lunge, the crowd recoils and surges in the same heartbeat, like a wave forgetting its orders. You shove forward, elbow and voice and shock as the assassin runs for waiting horses. He makes it almost clear, almost free, and then stumbles. Some say on a vine, some say on a root, others on fate. The men chasing him do not bring him back breathing. The theater fills with the sound of people realizing they were witnessing a hinge on which the door of the future has just swung. Your father does not get back up. Time after that becomes useless at keeping order. You remember fragments, a cloak thrown down and someone barking that he needs air, a ring forced into your palm and your mother's name on someone's lips, the heat of the day suddenly cold. You remember the way the sky kept shining as if it had not been told. You remember your own voice turning practical before your heart could catch up. Who is with us? Where are the horses? Where are the keys? Lock those gates. Send for that captain, but not the one who drinks with Attalus. Fetch the priest. Fetch the herald. Fetch anyone who knows how to make a crowd turn into a line. Grief has to stand outside the door. Inside, there is only calculation. You are 20. Men who have shaved twice as many years from their cheeks now look at you for orders. Some look with relief. You are the clear line. Others measure you like a dice throw. The web your father spun shivers with opportunity and danger. Persia will hear. The Greek cities will hear. Rival Macedonian blood will hear and start to warm.
Pausanias lies in the dust, and with him lies the most convenient version of the story. He cannot speak to say why. Did primate grievance drive him? Humiliation he blamed your father for failing to avenge? Some whisper about a banquet, an insult, a crime hushed by rank. Was he a blade in a larger hand? Anger from Persia, envy from within, the jealous guard turned weapon. Your mother's name is not spoken loudly, but it travels like incense, curling into places it has no right to be. She loved fiercely, hated cleanly, and never learned the middle dial on her feelings. Some will say she fanned coals. Some will say you knew. You do not answer stories when the price of answering is time. What you answer is the throne. Night falls, then rises again, and you are still giving orders. The dead are honored, the living are arranged. Messages sprint in every direction with the same sentence stamped into different wax. The army is with you, the companions are with you, the league holds. You speak like the bridge over a flooded river. If your voice sways, men will not cross. In the courtyard where you once practiced until your hands blistered, your father lies in the center on a bier. Songs bite the air and break. You stand beside him long enough to make a promise no one else can hear. Then you go back to the work. Work looks like this. Summon the nobles and ask your question with your eyes before you ask it with your mouth. Are you with the house of Philip or with your own? You put old quarrels into a single bucket and set it outside. The army will follow whoever pays and wins. You have to pay now and win soon. You make the treasury count out wages so no one pretends hunger when what they feel is ambition. You move fast because slowness invites invention. Amintas, son of the earlier king, once a child, now a man some might hold up as a banner, is too dangerous to leave standing. You make choices that court poets will never sing. Attalus, powerful uncle of your father's last bride, basks across the sea with troops earmarked for Persia and a pride that never learned to bend. Letters go out, and then men. Some returns are only ashes of what was written. Your mother acts with a fierceness you cannot publicly praise. Cleopatra Eurydice, her young children. This is the dark hallway of power where lamps are few. You step through it because there is no other route to the door marked king. Beyond the palace, each Greek city sniffs the air like a dog looking for weather. Athens calculates costs. Thebes sharpens memories.
Sparta, as always, prefers to speak with its feet. You anchor allies with letters and steel. In Thessaly, you secure your father's seat. In Thrace, you move quickly to show that the roads still belong to Macedonia. A league can fray at a single corner. You press every corner at once. The men who stood in the theater with you now watch your back with different eyes, some with loyalty, some with caution, a few with the kind of patience that waits for rain in the desert, knowing that one day even deserts get storms. You do not sleep well, but you sleep. You do not eat much, but you eat. You ride out to the training ground and put your horse through his paces. The sight of Bucephalus braided with you calms the lines on men's faces. They want proof not that you grieve, but that you endure. After the rites, after the first wave of arrests, after the messengers have worn grooves between cities, you stand in the same theater where a blade redrew your life, and you speak. You do not rise to poetry, you rise to clarity. You promise to keep the common peace, to finish the work your father started, to lead the campaign east that has already been blessed in 10 temples and dreamed in 1,000 homes. You remind them that the machine did not die with the craftsman. Then you close your mouth and let your presence be the last sentence. But presence alone is not enough. Whispers claim the gods spoke in your father's ear and stopped. Others say the gods are now looking at you, wondering if the wax is firm enough to take their seal. You will have to prove it the way kings have always proved it, by moving so decisively that rumor struggles to keep up. You've secured the hallways of the palace and the loyalties closest to your bed. Now comes the harder part, securing the borders that don't end at your front gate. Tribes in the north stir. Cities to the south test the knots that bind them. Across the sea, the empire you intend to invade listens for weakness in your march. And before you can cross any water, you will have to put out fires on 3 horizons, take an old city that dares to gamble on your youth, and show Greece that the spear still remembers how to point.
You don't inherit calm. You inherit a whirlwind and a clock. Every hour you fail to act is an invitation for someone else to try on your crown. So you move. First, south, to the neck of Greece where Thessaly once blocked your father. Their cavalry watches the past like a wolf at a gap in the fence. You do not charge the wolf. You vanish into the mountains, drag men and horses along a goat path the locals swear is only for goats, and come down behind the watchers at dawn. One look at your line where no line should be, and Thessaly switches from obstacle to ally. They name you Archon. Their horsemen add their thunder to yours. Then the Greek cities take a deep breath and try to guess who you are. Athens argues itself hoarse. Demosthenes calls you boy and barb. Others count your spears and count again. You ride to Corinth and face the league your father stitched, the common peace, the oath that stops Greek knives from slicing Greek throats and points them all east. They elect you hegemon. You promise the same goal: cross the water, pay back Persia, bring home prizes that make city porches glow. You let the promise sit, warm and bright. But first, the north. Spring in Thrace is green and ambush-colored. Tribali watch from the ridges of Haemus as your long spears climb the road. Their wagons crouch on the crest like harmless beasts until they are tipped. They roll down the slope like a wooden rock slide, iron clattering, gravity turned into a weapon. You don't flinch. You order the phalanx to open narrow lanes. Wagons whistle past through the gaps, and the rest splinter against locked shields. When the hill quiets, you send the hypaspists up like knives. The Tribali break, not because they are cowards, but because you refused their script and wrote your own in the middle of their sentence. At the Danube, the river spreads itself wide like a dare. The Getae man the far bank and shout what men always shout when they think water makes them safe. You spend the day gathering boats and straw, the night ferrying men across in silence. Dawn finds your troops where no one expected them, on the enemy shore, line-dressed,
spears low, your cavalry already inhaling the space between. The Getae drop their boasts the way men drop sacks when a roof beam cracks. You burn the camp, then give the smoke back to the river. Word rides in every direction. The new king crosses boundaries as if they were lines in wet sand. West now, into Illyrian hills where the air tastes like metal and men remember your father's hammer. Cletus, son of Bardalus, joins with Glaucius of the Talienti and digs into Pelion, a strong place that claws at the sky. They want you pinned. You arrive too fast. Take the heights the enemy counted on, and then find yourself the one boxed when fresh bands spill in behind. You don't panic. You drill in public, phalanx wheeling, files folding, cavalry exploding and snapping back, so the enemy watches a moving lesson in why they should stop believing you're trapped. When night comes, you walk your army out like a cat out of a snare, quiet, coiled, gone. At dawn, you wheel and hit Cletus as he's still telling himself the story where you were the one in trouble. He learns a different ending. Glaucius looks at the cost, does the math, and decides his sons will live longer if he chooses peace. The north goes quiet, not forever, but long enough. And then a rumor grows legs. Someone starts a story that you died in the western hills. It crosses passes faster than couriers and finds Thebes, proud, sore from Chaeronea, never truly at peace with Macedonian boots in its shadowed citadel, the Cadmea. Thebes listens and leaps. They ring the city with resolve, call allies, point at the garrison and promise to pull it down. Some in Athens smile into their cups. Some smother their smiles and count ships instead. You are not dead. You are very much alive, and you move like the correction of a mistake. From Illyria to Boeotia in days that scribes will argue about for generations, you arrive before some rebels have finished sharpening their courage. You camp within sight of Thebes' walls. Your men straighten lines. Your standards cut the wind into squares. You offer terms. Release the besieged. Take back those you exiled. Rejoin the peace. Accept a fine that hurts pride but spares blood. Thebes answers with arrows. Pride is a fine that always costs more than the number announced. You tighten the ring. The Cadmea's garrison stabs outward while your engineers push towers forward. A gate yields. A street becomes a battlefield the width of a cart. House by house, breath by breath, your army unthreads the city's weave. When the fighting ends, the weight of what has happened falls on everyone at once. You do not need to say anything aloud. The ruined blocks, the silence where shouting used to be, the doors left leaning like men who sat down and never stood again, these speak for you. You spare temples. You spare the poet's house, the one sacred to Pindar, whose songs had crowned your father's victories. But you let the world see that this is not a game with soft consequences. Thebes, the old lion, is removed from the board. Athens waits for your footsteps on her marble, heart banging against the cage of her ribs. Diplomats in wreaths arrive faster than fear can harden. You do not wear Thebes like a necklace to jingle at them. You speak of amnesty, of ships, of theaters that should stay open instead of shuttered. You ask for hostages and receive them, but you give back their dead with honors. You show teeth and mercy in alternating flashes. Across Greece, calculations change. In the islands and hill towns, men learn the new rule. Revolt is a gamble. The odds are not kind. Back in Corinth, the League recommits. Quotas of men and ships are tallied again with quieter hands. You visit the isthmus and the shrines, touch stone that remembers stories older than the cities around it. Some say you meet Diogenes, the philosopher who lives in a barrel and refuses to bow to anyone with a crown. You ask what you can do for him. He tells you to move. You're blocking his sun. You laugh, not because you like the insult, but because you respect a man whose needs are so small that power has no handle on him. The story spreads. It does you no harm. Now you look east without the itch between your shoulder blades. The north has been pressed flat. The center has been nailed tight. The south has been shown what breaking costs. You assign satraps where your father placed them, tighten the purse strings in the right places, and leave garrisons like stitches across the fabric you don't want to tear when you tug. The army, paid and proud, waits at the Hellespont like a bowstring pulled to the ear. At night, by the lamplight that has followed you from Mysa to battlefields and back, you roll the Iliad open again. Achilles still burns. Odysseus still thinks. You trace the route your father drew, and your hands will now walk, from the narrow water to the plains of Asia Minor, past cities that speak Greek with an Eastern accent, toward a king who sits on more gold than the gods require. The campaign is not a boast anymore. It is a schedule. One more morning in Macedonia. One more ride along the files to look into the eyes that will have to believe in you on days when the ground drinks more than the sky returns. You speak of pay, of plunder, of pride, but mostly of the work. The road ahead, the bridges to build, the gates to open, the names you will all carry home. They answer with the sound you wanted, the low thunder that means men have decided and will not undecide tomorrow. You have cut the knot at home, not with a sword stroke, but with speed, judgment, and the cold clarity that makes rivals choose caution. The sea glints like a blade beyond the Dardanelles. When you cross it, nothing you leave behind will be the same when you return, if you return, and you won't be the same either. All that remains is to put a foot on Asia's shore, greet old heroes in their own dust, and throw the first spear into a land that still thinks you are only a rumor carried by the wind. Because, once you set the heel of your sandal down on the far bank, the story changes from, can he hold what he has, to, how far can he go?
The strait looks like a blade laid between two continents, bright and thin, and you are the hand that means to close around it. Horses stamp the pebbled beach, oars clack in locks, trumpets talk in short sentences that make men move without thinking. The wind smells like salt and pine tar, and the deck pitch under your boots says one thing over and over: East. You make offerings because even a man who trusts his own right arm knows water listens to vows. Wine to the sea, incense to the sky, a bull for the god of crossings. Then you step aboard the lead ship and let the prow carry you into the narrow blue lane the world calls the Hellespont. The rowers set a steady drum. Behind you, a spine of hulls stitches Macedonia to the horizon. Ahead, the Asian shore watches like a serious host. Halfway across, you take a spear from the rack. Not ceremony for its own sake, but grammar, something every soldier in your wake can read. You balance the shaft, feel the weight, and hurl it over the water so it sticks in the damp sand of the far bank. Spear won land, you say, not to boast, but to declare the rules you will play by. You do not inherit Asia, you will win it. You land armed because symbols only work when they are tied to steel. Sand takes your heel, salt bites your tongue. Buphalus snorts, sees the space in front of him, and accepts it as road. Horse cheer the way men cheer when they realize the story they were promised is actually starting. You do a strange thing next, strange to anyone who thinks kings are made only of speed. You turn aside from the direct path of war and ride inland a short way to a hill with old mounds and older names. Ilium, Troy, still whispers under the grass. You climb to Achilles' tomb with Hephaestion at your shoulder, lay a wreath, and thank a shade for the courage you have practiced since boyhood. Hephaestion garlands Patroclus, and eyes around you note the pairing without comment. In the temple, You hang up armor as an offering and accept a sacred shield on loan, the kind of favor that reminds you a city can arm a man in ways that iron never will. You run a race, as the old tales tell, not to win a laurel, but to measure your breath against legends. When you come down from the mound, the story of Asia no longer feels like a rumor across water. It feels like something with a pulse. The Persians are not asleep. Satraps in braided belts and stiff beards gather their riders and their river watchers. Memnon of Rhodes, a Greek in Persian service and no fool, advises what your own mind would advise if you were them. Scorch the coastal grain, strip the towns, starve the invader, make the war into a long, mean road. Pride overrules prudence. Drive him back into the sea, the nobles want. They ride for the Granicus, a quick-beating river in spring, and line their glittering cavalry along the bank. You march north along the coast, a column of dust with teeth in it, then swing inland where green hills hold the river like a tightrope. Afternoon light skims the water. The near bank is easy, the far bank bristles. Parmenion, sober as iron, rides close and advises waiting till dawn. Let the current slacken, let the men rest, let the enemy cool in their courage. You listen, and then you choose. Waiting teaches nerves to talk. You don't intend to give them that lesson today. You form the line with the calm of a man ordering breakfast. Light troops forward to sting and blind. Archers test the air with feathers. Then a wedge of your companions, your hammer, forms on the right with you at its tip. You angle toward the water where the bank shelves steep, and the current grabs ankles like a jealous hand. The Persians expect hesitation. You give them spray. The first horse hits the river with a sound like a broken amphora. Your wedge plunges, wheel-high foam whitening against greaves. Missiles knit the air, splashing and hissing. Men shout as much to keep courage tall as to communicate. You hold the point, not because bravado makes you foolish, but because geometry makes it necessary. The wedge only cuts if the tip stays true. Hooves take purchase on gravel. You burst from the water like a thrown spear, and the far bank arrives as a wall of armored men and thick horseflesh. Contact is less like a clash, and more like a door slammed against your chest. Lances splinter. The fight contracts to the space between faces. You mark the important plumes, leaders first, always. Drive at the knot around Mithridates, kin to the great king, and make his guard your first answer to Persia's question. A scimitar flashes in your peripheral vision. Another noble leans to carve your helmet like fruit. Before the arc can finish, Cletus, your Cletus, rips in from your left and turns that blade story into a handle bouncing in the dust. You do not pause to thank him. You do not forget. On the left, your Thessalians bite and hold. In the center, the phalanx sloshes across, files deforming in the stream, and then snapping straight like reeds that remember the wind's proper direction. Hypostastes guard the seams, changing shape the way water changes shape when you pour it into a bowl, always filling the gap, never spilling out. More Persian nobles press you. Their armor is gorgeous and heavy. Their horses are brave and bred for this very ground. Brave does not save a man whose plan is wrong. The wedge opens the line like a key. Once through, you wheel left along the bank and roll the cavalry up like a carpet. The faces in front of you change from eagerness to calculation to that specific look men wear when they realize staying is more dangerous than turning. When they turn, you do not let courtesy slow you. River fights forgive no half measures. If you leave teeth behind you, they will chew your ankles for miles. The cavalry breaks first, as cavalry does when its front rank loses nerve. The infantry the satraps kept back, Greeks serving Persia, find themselves suddenly more alone than a man on a wide plain. They fight like professionals, and die like them too, holding shape long after it ceases to matter. You won't forget that either. But you have a message to write, and history prefers verbs. When it's over, the Granicus runs redder than it started. Poets will overdo the color, as poets must. You walk the bank, checking wounds with the eye Aristotle taught you to trust. You search for names whose loss would tear holes you don't have thread to mend. You find Cletus and grip his forearm for one stark second longer than you need to. He grins because that's who he is, and the grin lands in your chest like a promise coming due later. Now the politics of victory begins. You strip the fallen Persian nobles of their glittering gear and send the best pieces back to Greece with a line engraved sharp enough to cut Athenian pride. Spoils offered by Alexander, the son of Philip, and the Greeks, to Athena, except the Spartans. You choose those words for the same reason you threw the spear. Messages must be plain. To the Ionian cities that have waited for someone to knock, you offer friendship in Greek and mercy in action. Doors open. Satraps who prefer their heads where they are weigh your terms and find them lighter than death. You turn south along the coast, where ports and walls can serve you better than any parade ground. Miletus tests your patience. You answer with ships and ladders. Halicarnassus tries engines and night sorties. You reply with engineers who know how to read a wall the way a physician reads a pulse. Each gate you open feeds your army, with stores, with money, with confidence, and starves your enemy of harbors. Memnon, who should have been obeyed at the beginning, slips away onto the sea with a strategy that will trouble your islands for months. You take note. You don't chase the wrong problem when the right problem is still ahead. At every shrine you can reach without breaking stride, you sacrifice, not to ask the gods to do your work, but to remind your men that the work means something more than plunder. You restore civic rules where you can, install Macedonian overseers where you must, and watch the map change color under your feet, not with a splash, but with the slow seep of a tide coming in. Word rides faster than sandals. In the deep interior, a king sits on a mountain of resources and a throne built to outlast families. He is not moved yet. He will. For now, his satraps have learned what happens when they try to settle a river argument with cavalry alone. Next time, he will come himself, and he will bring a field so wide with men that it will look like a harvest walking. You stand on a captured wall and look east. Behind you, the sea you crossed is already a story men are telling in markets. Before you, a road reaches toward a name the world will remember like a drumbeat. A plain where a young king and the king of kings will measure each other in dust and daylight. You know how to cross water. You've shown how to break a river line. Now you will find out what happens when a whole empire gathers to stop you in a narrow place where the mountains press close and the wind smells like iron. Because beyond these coastal victories, in a pass near the town of Issus, the great king himself is waiting, and the game changes when the man at the center finally steps onto the board.
Wind funnels through the Cilician gates like a god's breath, hard and cool, and you ride it east with the army strung out along the road like a bronze spine. Behind you are ports that now speak your name at their harbors. Ahead is a king who has not yet spoken at all. Word comes like thunder rolling over stone. Darius is moving, not with satraps and cousins, but with the weight of the empire itself. Immense, jeweled, confident. He does not intend to box with you by proxy. He intends to step into the ring. The map turns slippery. You push through the pass and into Cilicia's plain. Take Tarsus and nearly trade your life for a cold plunge in the Cydnus. The fever that grips you reminds everyone that destiny still has to share a bed with flesh. You rise again, thinner but unscratched in spirit, and march north toward Syria to meet the King of Kings on ground you choose. But Darius thinks like a hunter too. He swings wide through the Amanaeus and slips behind you, back to Issus, where the plain narrows and the mountains press the sea. In one move, he turns your rear into your front. The board reorients. Your scouts confirm what your bones already guessed. The great king waits north of you along a short, mean river called the Pinaris. You pivot. The column coils and uncoils. Armor sings as buckles tighten. You ride the line to let every man see your face at least once. They don't need speeches. They need to borrow your calm. Parmenion, takes the left near the sea, where the ground pinches and breaks into marsh and sand. You hold the right with the companions, inland, where hills lift like knuckles. Between, the phalanx plants its forest of ash, files deep, shields tight, hedge of iron. Hypaspists guard the seam where your right hand meets your center. Archers settle in like wasps. Across the Panaris, Persian cavalry glitters in ranks so thick they look like a wall dressed in color. Greek mercenaries, the best money can hire, anchor the center behind the stream's shallow cut, their shields close, their spears honest. Darius sits where kings sit, high and visible, a chariot in a halo of parasols, flanked by banners that pull the eye like magnets. He has more men, you have more decisions. The first decision is to start. Parmenion sends the Thessalians forward to test and hold the Persian right by the shore. They bite, get bit, and bite again. The stream is nothing to look at, but it pulls at ankles and minds. Up on your side, you form a slanted line, refuse your own left, and swell your right into the shape of a spearhead pointing at the place where Persian cavalry masses thickest. The order passes down the file. Forward. Water takes your horse to the knee and then lets go. Missiles sizzle. You do not slow. The Panaris is not a moat, it is a mark you step over on your way to the work. Your companions hit with the shock you've drilled into them since Pella, wedge tight, pace high, no second thoughts. The Persian left staggers under the weight, then remembers it is supposed to be proud and pushes back with lances thrust from horses trained for this very dance. For long breaths, the fight is not a plan, but a knot of faces and metal. You hunt plumes, cut through to leaders, show the rank and file what happens when their tall men fall. It is the Granicus again, but worse, closer, heavier, with the Empire's eye watching. Down the center, the phalanx grinds. The stream wrecks perfect geometry, files thin, swell, thin again. Men step too wide and are yanked back into rhythm by the shove of the shield behind. Across from them, the Greek mercenaries fight like a mirror, ordered, brave, expensive. They make you pay in blood for each forward foot. Hypaspists run where lines leak. You taste iron behind your tongue and shout the names that turn individuals back into a single animal, Macedon, until the animal remembers how to move. On your inland flank, the world tilts. Your wedge begins to climb the Persian left, breaking it into beautiful pieces that forget how to be a whole. Here is the hinge. You lean hard. Horses scream, men roar, you push through and then wheel inward across the enemy's open side like a door slamming against a wall. The center, those hired Greeks, now feels pressure from front and flank. A good line can endure one storm. Two is a test any mortal timber starts to fail. The chariot gilding Darius's courage becomes a trap. The air thickens with messages no courier carries, nobles unhorsed, banners swallowed, left wing bending toward panic. A king has duties: stand, signal, steady, until duty collides with survival. You see the moment the light changes around him. Charioteer wheeling, servants grabbing, royal fear peeling away like gold leaf in heat. He turns, not a tactic, a leaving. It is an old story told again with new names. When the center of a world moves backwards, the edges do not hold. Panic is a smoke that chokes instructions. The Persian right near the sea feels its king depart as surely as if a rope tied to their ribs were yanked. They fight, then flinch, then flee the way a field of grain leans all at once when wind finds the right angle. Your cavalry does not chase scatter without purpose. You aim first at the heart, with every charge your lungs can buy. The royal guard, the clustered color, the empty chariot clattering away. You do not catch Darius. He rides too fast and too early, but you catch what he leaves behind. The royal family, his mother Sisigambis, his wife Statera, daughters, a son still small, wait in a richly peopled camp for a victory that no longer exists. They're taken with a care you make everyone see. When Sisigambis mistakes Hephaestion for you and tries to fall prostrate at his feet, you lift her and tell her you are both Alexander. You treat them as honored guests, not bargaining chips, and in that one act, you announce the kind of king you intend to be. Mercy becomes a tool that will open more gates than a ram. Night gathers over the plain and counts the cost. Persian dead cover the ground like a rough new skin. Macedonian losses puncture your joy. You memorize names because leaders who don't cannot be trusted with more. You walk the lines in the dark, speak softly to the men whose friends won't answer roll call tomorrow, and let them see your face without armor in the lamplight. Victory feels heavy because weight always follows worth. Within days, a letter arrives with enough perfume to announce itself before the seal cracks. Darius offers ransom for his family, friendship with a border drawn west of the Halys, the hand of a daughter, titles that sound royal in Greek and thunder in Persian. It is a tempting future. Peace now, glory tall enough for most men, and a world organized around a line that lets everyone keep their favorite illusions. You reply as the man who threw a spear at Asia's shore. No ransom, your guests are not prisoners. No half peace, the world will not be cut in two to flatter two names. If Darius wants his family at his own table, he can meet you again and take them back by right of victory. Your army reads that answer the way they read your wedge carving a flank. It is a promise of more road. And now the road can't go straight inland, not yet. On water, Persia still breathes like a giant. Your land victories are poems until you cut the empire's throat at sea. But you have no navy strong enough to stare down theirs. So, you choose a different way to sink a fleet. Remove its harbors. Take the cities that feed and dock it, and the ships will starve tied to their own moorings. South, along the Phoenician coast, toward cities that build the very ships your enemy sails, toward priests who speak in languages that taste of cedar and salt, toward an island that pretends it is a continent. Its walls are tall, its pride taller. It sits a short swim off the shore and thinks the sea makes it a god. To take Asia's breath, you must first take Tyre's. And that will mean trying something so unlikely that men will talk about it every time they see land reaching into water. You will need to drag the land itself out to meet the city that refuses to come to you.
Tyre sits in blue water like a dare. Two harbors bite into its sides, the Sidonian to the north, the Egyptian to the south. And around both, walls so high they turn the sea itself into a moat. The city floats half a mile off the coast, sure that salt will do the work of soldiers. When your envoys ask to enter and lay a simple offering to Melkart, the city's Heracles, the Tyrians smile, point you to an old shrine on the mainland, and close their gates. It isn't just a refusal, it's a lesson. Some cities believe geography is a god. You answer with a lesson of your own. If the island won't come to you, you will walk to it. You order the mainland houses of old Tyre torn down until the shore is a pile of bones, stone, timber, smashed roof tile. Then you turn ruin into a road. Men shovel rock into the surf. Others roll logs like axle-less wheels. The first stretch of the mole grows easily, the water shallow and obedient. Spirits are high. You can see the island clearly. The distance feels like a long stride. Tyre watches. At first they laugh. Who builds land by hand? Then they see the line reach deeper water, and the laughter thins. They pull out their tools. Swimmers slip under the surface like eels, knives and teeth to cut the cables of your anchors so the heavy frames drift and break.
Fire ships nose out from the harbor with wind behind them, rigging soaked in pitch, sparks hiding in rope like foxes in grass. Your men work the pumps and the hooks, but flame is a fast teacher. Towers of timber that took weeks to raise become evening smoke in a single bad hour. The sea, so beautiful at dawn, hisses as tar melts into it. You do not call it off, you call it even. If the water wins round 1, you bring more hands to round 2. You widen the mole so it won't crumble under wave slap, sink piles deeper, lash beams tighter, plate the vulnerable faces of your towers with raw, wet hides so sparks starve when they land. Meanwhile, the campaign shifts on a larger board. Remember the coastal cities you faced after Issus, the shipwrights and mariners of Phoenicia? Sidon opens to you. Arados opens. Byblos opens. With the mainland ports on your side, their fleets become your fleets. The sea that once carried fire ships now delivers squadrons that wear your badge. A ring closes. You bring those ships to Tyre and choke both harbors at once. The Tyrians still fight like men who expect the ocean to keep its promises. They rush out in fast strikes when gusts favor them, grab a ship or two with skill that makes even your sailors stare, and dart back under the walls. They fish for your siege engines with grapnels and cut their ropes with bronze the color of dusk. Inside, they keep their forges bright and their courage brighter. They string fresh lines of defense behind every stone you threaten. They are not trusting the water only, they are trusting their own hands. You keep walking the road you're making. The mole creeps forward, wood and stone biting deeper into blue. Engines roll to the tip, tall towers shouldering close like oxen, rams tucked underneath with heads plated in iron. Arrows stitch the air. Stones arc and crash with a shout. The city answers with catapults that find men on platforms and knock them into the surf, with pots of sand heated red that pour down armor gaps and turn courage into a dance no one wants to see twice. When wind favors them, they loose more fire ships. When it favors you, your ships shoulder in and trade blows at the harbor mouths, oars turning the water to froth. Months teach both sides the same truth. No single trick will decide this. You try a new angle. Divers go down in daylight with no weapons at all, only measuring lines and chalk, mapping the seabed where your mole stumbles. Engineers draw plans that look like the ribs of a wooden whale. You ferry in even taller towers from Sidon and Cyprus, the timber groaning in its farness like a living thing. The mole thickens again, higher, wider, stone upon stone, until the sea finally stops shrugging it off and starts accepting it as shore. A lucky strike opens the chance you've been waiting for. Your engines crack a section of the southern wall near the Egyptian harbor. It isn't a grand theatrical breach. It's a bruise that can become a wound if you hit it again and again without letting scab form. You bring ships heavy with boarding rafts to kiss the broken teeth of stone, while the mole's towers rake the parapets with arrow rain. On signal, Hypaspists in armor that shines like wet rock lean into ladders and bridges, legs pumping, shields high. Above them, Tyrians fight with the ferocity of neighbors defending a front door. The first wave shatters, the second sticks. The third makes space with that stubborn, unspectacular skill your best infantry has. Step, lock, shove, repeat. At the same time, your navy finds the rhythm at the northern harbor. Chains rattle, rams bite, marines spill onto quays where oil and blood make footing treacherous and victory irreversible. Once both harbors feel pressure, the city's breath comes short. They split to fight everywhere and can't fight enough anywhere. You throw the door open wider. The breach at the south stops being a hole and becomes a hallway. You go in. Street fighting is a different kind of math. Walls and engines count less. Nerve and knowing when to turn a corner count more. Tyre has prepared for this too. Barriers and alleys, killing grounds behind innocent courtyards, roofs turned into small fortresses. Your men advance building by building, not because they want to, but because it's the only way a city like this gives up. In the crush, you think of Thebes, and decide once again you must show the map what defiance costs when warnings are ignored. When it ends, the blue around Tyre looks wrong. The brand new isthmus binds the city to the mainland like a scar where the sea used to breathe. You spare their god's temple, you spare those the gods protect. A handful of priests, foreign envoys who trusted the laws of hospitality. Many others face punishments so dark we won't describe them here if we want to keep the channel monetized. The lesson is not joy, it's geometry. A ring closed around a city that believed rings could not be drawn in water. The strangest thing is what lasts. The mole you threw at the sea does not vanish with the trumpet calls. Silt slides along it year after year like a blanket pulled by a sleeper. Storms bring sand and leave it the way generous friends leave bread on your table. In time, the island becomes a peninsula. Centuries later, people will stand on that strip of land, buy figs from vendors, and forget there was ever water between. For you, Tyre is not a monument. It is a hinge. With Phoenicia tamed, the Persian fleet loses lungs. Without harbors, ships, or stories. You move south along the coast and knock at Gaza, a stubborn gate on a high knuckle of land. It holds longer than it looks like it should. You take it anyway, because patience is a weapon. Beyond Gaza, the road straightens like a spear toward a river no army can ignore, and a kingdom that will not greet you with walls and arrows, but with open palms. Egypt waits, not as a fight, but as a welcome. A people tired of satraps who tax and take, a priesthood ready to read your victories as omens. There, between sea and river, between desert and delta, you will draw a city on the sand with barley meal, and hear birds try to erase it. You will choose a harbor, a street grid, a library in your mind that doesn't yet have shelves. And by the time you leave, the map will carry your name at its edge like a signature. Because after making land where there was sea, you're about to make a city where there was only wind. And that city will outlast every battle.
Egypt greets you like a long, cool drink after months of salt and stone. The Nile spreads its green fingers into the delta, and villages sit on little rises like boats that decided to stop floating. In Phoenicia, cities argued. In Gaza, walls clawed your ladders. Here, doors open before you knock. Priests come out with garlands and incense, their eyes measuring you not as a foreign blade, but as a solution to an old problem. Satraps who took more than they gave, soldiers who counted taxes better than stars. You step into Memphis with a careful stride, no swagger, no apology. You make offerings to Apis, the living bull sacred to Ptah, because here piety is a language and you intend to speak it well. Crowns are not one size fits all. In Egypt, a king is not just a ruler, he is a piece of the cosmos slotted into place. They set the double crown on your head, white for Upper Egypt, red for Lower, and the air in the temple seems to thicken with meaning. You are pharaoh now in their eyes, custodian of Ma'at, the balance that keeps sky and river from quarreling. You don't scoff at the weight. You feel it settle like armor you'll learn to move in. You confirm temple lands, remit arrears that stung the poor, and send messages whispering the same sentence in a dozen ways. The way things should be is the way things will be again. But you didn't come only to inherit a ritual. You came to write on a map. The Nile is a gift, but also a thread that can tangle. To hold Egypt is to hold its mouth, the place where river meets sea, wind meets shore, ships meet markets. The ancient port at Canopus is too shallow, too silt-hungry, too curved the wrong way for what you imagine. So you ride west along the coast until the land gives you a shape that answers your questions before you ask them. A beach with firm sand, a broad lagoon inside, Lake Mareotis for quiet water. An island called Pharos, standing like a friendly sentinel just offshore,
and a stretch of coast where the Etesian winds blow fair from Greece to Egypt as if they want to carry grain and ideas between the two forever. You walk the sand with Dinocrates, your architect, tall, clever, the kind of man who sees cities the way other men see a room they can tidy. He carries strings and stakes. You carry a picture in your head. A city that is both bridge and mirror, Greek in mind, Egyptian in soul. Open to traders who bring tin and cedar and papyrus and stories. The ground is too loose to mark with chalk. The scribes fetch barley meal. You draw your city in lines of grain on the shore. Broad canopic way running east-west, a north-south spine crossed by a clean grid. Quarters for Greeks and Egyptians, room for docks, room for markets, room for temples to gods with many names for the same sky. The birds come down in a sudden silver rush and eat your plan. Men gasp. Is it a bad sign when the future vanishes into beaks? The oldest priest with you smiles and shakes his head. Not a devouring, he says, an omen. The city will feed the world. You accept the reading because good omens do more work than bad ones, and because, in your bones, you already believe it. You order foundations. You order a causeway, a heptadion, 7 stades long, to link Pharos to the mainland, turning an island into a breakwater and bending the sea to your design. 2 harbors will embrace the shore, one opening to the wide Mediterranean, one turning inward to Lake Mareotis, and canals that will tug goods deep into Egypt by river. A city, in other words, that breathes both salt and silt. Stones begin to arrive, rolled and levered, pulled and cajoled, while surveyors pace with cords and notched rods, making right angles in a world that prefers curves. Streets you can't yet walk already exist in men's heads. You set aside places for shrines that let Greek and Egyptian names sit at the same table. Zeus, Ammon, Isis, Serapis, a god who will be named later, but you've already left a seat. The Muses, who will one day have a house so busy with voices, it will sound like the inside of a seashell. You do not build the library, you plant the expectation of one. You do not lift the lighthouse, you dictate the need for it by making Pharos a hinge the world will depend on. Others, Ptolemy and his line, will pile the stones high and crown them with fire. But the first sentence is yours. You announce policies that feel like architecture too. Greek as the language of the administration. Your army and settlers know the script. It oils the gears. Egyptian laws and customs respected in their own spheres. Priests keep their calendars, farmers their floods and fields, mixed juries for mixed cases, grain shipments regular enough that merchants can count on profit with their fingers, not just their hopes. A Greek city in form, an Egyptian home in function, a sea town in appetite, a river town in patience. You tell settlers to come. You tell craftsmen to bring tools and families. You promise the thing every working man listens for, safety enough to plan next year in detail. At night, the sea hisses to itself, and the camp candles glitter along the future streets like preview stars of a play not yet staged. You sit on rolled maps and watch shadows crawl over the sandbar where men are driving pilings by lamplight. You talk with Hephaestion about what cities remember and what they forget. You talk with Ptolemy about harbor depths and tax schedules, a conversation you suspect he will still be having when your voice is remembered only in reliefs. You talk with the priests about winds and calendars and wrestle with how to make a place that feels like home to people who don't agree on where heaven sits. Dinocrates proposes details with the eagerness of a master given a perfect canvas. A grid means breezes can sweep the heat out of the heat. A wide canopic way means processions can move without crushing stalls. Colonnades cast portable shade. A planned necropolis keeps the living city from tripping over the dead. Warehouses will face the lake, not the sea, so storms and rage while commerce yawns and counts. The causeway will create two harbors with different moods, shelter within, readiness without. You nod because this is the kind of war you also like, a problem that yields to thought, muscle, and patience. You choose a governor, Cleomenes of Necrotis, to mind the purse and keep the stones coming even when your shadow is far away. You do not yet know he will wring Egypt like a damp cloth to pad the coffers for men who will succeed you. You do know that cities are bets placed on people who were not invited to the original table. You smooth that worry with a ritual. Sacrifice, dedications, the old thank you words spoken to new listening ears. Word of the foundation travels faster than stone ships can sail. On the islands, men joke that you are building a city out of barley. In Asia, nobles frown that you are building anything at all when there's still a great king to answer to. In Memphis, priests murmur that the young pharaoh understands what a king must give to the land, so the land will give back. Your soldiers grin at the thought of a port where pay turns into goods better than whatever camp merchants can pry from the back of a donkey. Traders, hearing Alexandria, begin to imagine profit as if the name were a sail already swelling. You swear you can see the future standing ankle-deep in foam, colonnades humming in the afternoon, scholars bickering softly over scrolls, shipmasters cursing the crosswind as they nose into the western harbor, a beacon blazing on Pharos like a sun that took night personally. You will not live to watch it glow. You are aware of that as sharply as you are aware of the salt on your lips. Founders rarely enjoy the finished room, but founders get to choose the windows and the view. Egypt gives you more than plans on sand. It gives you a sense that conquest can be a kind of building, that empires can be stitched with streets as well as spears. You have shown Thebes what ruin looks like, and Tyre what persistence feels like. Here you show the world what your peace could look like if you keep winning. A place where the map's edges meet and shake hands. Yet Egypt also holds a question, older than any stone you can set. In the western deserts is a temple under a sky so clean it makes men feel examined. The priests there speak for a god whom Greeks call Ammon, and Egyptians know as Amun. Ram-horned, remote, the kind of god who answers only when the question is heavy enough to bend a man's knees. Men say the desert itself tests those who seek him, that the sands swallow liars and flatterers and leave only those who truly want to know.
And after laying out a city for the living, you find yourself wanting to ask a question about yourself that only a silent place can answer. So you will leave the Nile's green, enter the gold where water goes missing, and ride towards Siwa, where an oracle waits, with words that could turn a king into something more. Or reveal that he has always been only what he can carry. You leave the green ribbon of the Nile and ride into a page with almost no ink on it. The desert is a silence that stretches. Dunes move like slow animals. The sun writes the same sentence over and over until men forget there are other words. You take a small escort, no banners to brag at the sky, just companions, guides, camels heavy with skins of water, and the stubborn idea that answers live where noise cannot reach. From Paraitonion, you turn west, and then a little south, toward an oasis the Egyptians call Siwa, and the Greeks rename with their mouths, Oasis of Ammon. The road is not a road. It's wind-carved memory, a suggestion. Heat makes mirages rise like cities that can't stop lying. One morning the wind lifts and the world becomes grain pouring from an invisible jar. Sand finds teeth, eyes, the seam of every letter in a spoken word. You tie cloth tight and move by feel.
hand on the next man's shoulder, horse's head low, prayer in your chest that is not a request so much as a promise you intend to keep. Then the desert surprises you with kindness. Clouds button the sky shut for an hour. Rain stings, not much, but enough to turn thirst back into patience. Another day, crows appear. They fly ahead and then circle back, scolding, as if annoyed you can't see what they see. Your guides smile and say Ammon sends them. You are a student of Aristotle. You are also a son raised on stories where gods walk in sandals when it pleases them. You don't argue with omens that point the right way. Siwa rises from the flat like an emerald pinned to gold. Date palms clatter softly. Pools shine with the kind of blue men dream about and wake up angry. The settlement is narrow streets, mud brick walls, voices in a dialect that feels like wind through reeds. Above it all, on a knuckled hill at Gaugamela, stands the temple. Tight courtyards, shadowed rooms, walls that hold heat and keep secrets. Priests meet you in linen and measured steps. They smell of incense and a long conversation with time. They don't look surprised. People who keep oracles never look surprised. They lead you through halls where painted rams look down, horns curling like waves caught in stone. The innermost room explains itself by refusing to be noisy. Only a bark of sacred wood, veiled. Only a presence you are supposed to feel with the part of you that knows when a storm is coming before the trees admit it. You ask the questions you came to ask, not like a boy fishing for compliments, but like a man who needs a weight he can set against all the other weights leaning on him. The first is simple and impossible. Have the men who cut my father down all been answered for? The god's voice comes by way of a priest who has practiced sounding like a place that isn't his own mouth. Yes, he says, the guilty have met their measure. You taste relief and the old ache together. The second question is stranger because it reaches beyond the human ledger into the founder's account book. Who is my father? Not by name, that everyone knows, but by rank in the universe. The answer comes wrapped in titles Greeks will argue about for centuries. Son of Ammon, the priests say. Son of Zeus, your men will translate when they tell it later. You don't crow. You don't kneel until your knees bruise. You let the words sit in the room like a new weight. In Egypt, the pharaoh is part of the frame that holds the sky in place. At Siwa, the frame acknowledges you. Afterward, in the outer court where light returns like sound after a cave, you breathe easier without smiling. Hephaestion studies your face the way only he can. You two share a cup. He says nothing you need to answer. The priests bring titles and a crown made of the desert's patience. You accept honors without letting them grow handles men can yank you around by. You recognize the danger inside a gift. To believe the name means the work is finished. You thank the god because thanks is the right language here, and you leave because the road does not honor those who linger to admire the start of it. Back in Memphis, you give offerings and decrees. You arrange for temples to keep their calendars and for soldiers to mind their purses without plucking the farmers too hard. Alexandria's grid stretches another finger toward the sea. Surveyors argue amiably about corners and shade. You sign a few more orders that feel like planting trees whose fruit other men will eat. At night, the desert's quiet lingers in your ears like a low chord that makes other sounds align. Then East calls again, with a voice you can hear even over the market noise. Darius is not done. After Issus, he ran, but he did not break. He gathers now on the far side of rivers whose names taste old. Tigris, Euphrates, and he does not intend to be caught at a stream with bad footing this time. He has chosen open ground and is making it flatter still, carving a plain near a village the Greeks call Gaugamela, Camel's House, and the locals know near Arbela. He levels the earth so chariots with scythed axles can run clean and cut lanes through courage. He calls up Bactrian horse with bows. Indian elephants that make even veteran mounts snort and roll their eyes, more infantry than a single glance can count, and banners enough to turn the horizon into a festival of color. Somewhere on the march north out of Egypt, a letter finds you again with perfume enough to bully the dust. Darius offers more this time. Vast ransom, a daughter's hand, lands to the Euphrates, friendship printed in terms even greedy men would call generous. Your officers argue in low voices by the lamp, prudent mouths talking about enough. You listen, hear the good in their fear, and then fold the offer like a map you don't need yet. All of Asia, you say softly, not for drama, but because you threw a spear into this continent and promised to win what it stuck in. You send back a sentence that doesn't insult, but doesn't bend. If the King of Kings wants terms, he can take them on a field. You cross Syria again, a tide going out after coming in. At the Euphrates, the Persians burn boats and guard crossings you never intend to use. You float men where the enemy isn't. At the Tigris, you watch the current bite and choose speed over elaborate caution, because the plain beyond is the enemy's true plan. Scouts return with the same story told by different mouths. The ground has been combed of stones, markers set for chariots to race, the camp bright with confidence, and lit at night as if the stars have decided to come down and join the watch. On the eve of the fight, the sky puts on a show scholars will write about. Shadows on the moon, a slow dimming that make even men who don't like omens scratch the back of their necks. Your diviners say the sign points east to Persia's loss, west to Macedon's gain. You let the favorable reading settle like a cloak around shoulders that must not shiver, and then do the most practical thing a man can do before dawn: sleep. Soldiers hear you have slept, and their shoulders loosen. Calm travels faster than fear when it has a real bed. In the morning, you will draw a line thinner than thread and hold it against a carpet of men. You will hang the fate of cities you founded and promises you made on a plan that must work on dirt polished for your enemy's favorite weapon. You will decide whether to meet the scythes head-on or turn their speed into emptiness. You will ask the companions for one more wedge that hurts and one more wheel that breaks a hinge. And somewhere in the dust, a king who once fled at Issus will either learn how to stand or write his own end with his chariot's track. Because the oracle named you son, Egypt crowned you pharaoh, and your men call you king. But on a plain near Gaugamela, only one word will matter when the sun goes down: winner.
Dawn at Gaugamela begins with breath held. The plain is scraped smooth, a table set to serve one dish: speed. In the Persian camp, scythed chariots gleam like hungry saws, and the banners make a forest that bends without breaking when wind runs through it. On your side, there is less silk and more certainty. You ride the line once, twice, 3 times, until the men who need to borrow your calm have had their fill. You set your shape. The phalanx anchors the middle, files deep, sarissas slanted like winter rain. Hypaspists, those quick hands at the seam between foot and horse, hold the hinge where your right joins your center. Parmenion takes the left, the Salians ready to fight patient, stubborn battles near the low ground by the river. You wait the right, as always, with the companions, a wedge with your name sharpened on its point. Behind the first line, you keep a second, reserves to plug holes or bite opportunities. The plan is not complicated, the timing is. Across the flat, the great king has thrown everything that a rich empire believes can turn will into law. Bactrian horse cluster near his right, archers and slingers thick as flies where they can sting. Indian elephants snorting at men who pretend not to be impressed. Endless spearmen whose helmets glitter like a shore. The chariots sit in front, teams trembling under goads, blades fixed to axles, waiting to chew. Darius stands high in a chariot under a canopy,
a silhouette men can use to steady their courage or measure their fear. You begin, not by rushing, but by sliding. Your whole army edges diagonally right, slow as a shadow, refusing the trap the Persians have prepared in the center. They want you to run headlong onto polished ground where scythes will sing. You intend to make them either chase your shifting front or attack on an angle that squanders the terrain they groomed all night. Dust rises as if the earth is erasing old chalk marks and drawing new ones to fit your hand. They blink, and then they move. Darius signals, and the shined plain erupts. Chariots leap forward in a clatter that sounds like a bronze shop collapsing. The first line of Persian horse pours around the flanks, where they hope to fold you like cloth. You answer with drilled courage. When the chariots come, you don't lock shields like frightened turtles. You open lanes, the way you did for the Tribali wagons on Himus. Files step aside at the last instant. Javelins and darts find horses. Drivers lose hands on reins. The monsters that were supposed to crack a wall find themselves passing through a forest that refuses to be a door. Those that make it to the rear are met by the second line and turned into splinters and stories. On the left, Parmenian's men take the first hard bite. The Persian right is thick with cavalry and confidence. They hit like a storm front meets hills, noisy, broad, and determined to grind. Thessalians answer with the gravity they're famous for. None of the trumpet of glorious charges, only the firm sound of men doing arithmetic with bodies and horses. They bend and don't break. Messages arrive that sound like breathing through clenched teeth. Holding, pressed, holding, pressed again. You trust that rhythm. You don't chase it. You have your own hinge to break. On the right, you push farther out than they planned, your oblique order towing their line away from its polished killing ground. A gap opens, small at first, then wide enough to see with the chest as well as the eyes. It is the seam between the Persian center, where Heerd Greek foot waits behind the chariot wreckage, and their left, a mass of noble riders who are finding your companions less decorous than they expected. Now, you say, not loudly, and the wedge tightens. Hooves churn the smooth earth into chewed mud. Breath burns. Your spear takes a new angle every heartbeat. You trust Cletus on your flank. Trust Aristo's file to watch the space you can't stare at. Trust the habit your men made out of courage. You hit the hinge like a door closing in a hard wind. For a long minute, there is no strategy, only faces, metal, leather, the shock of bone on wood, the taste of iron in the back of your mouth. You find plumes that matter and pull them down into the dust. Your guard knows your thoughts by the set of your shoulders. The Persian left begins to forget it is a left and remembers only that it is many separate men on separate horses. That is when you wheel inward, not a drift, not a creep, a decision, slicing behind their front to show the center a truth it can't afford. It is now alone. Darius sees it. Everyone sees it. His chariot wheels chew the ground, looking first for patience and then for exit. A king's duty is to stand until standing serves no one. At Issus, he learned how thin the thread is between courage and folly, when the heart of an army is the man most likely to be captured. He turns. Standards around him switch from hold to guard to go. The motion ripples outward like a sudden wind over barley. Men who would have died rather than step back now understand that stepping back is the new order. You drive for the center because that is your job. The Heerd Greeks fight like a conscience, unyielding, inconvenient, necessary to reckon with. You do not give them the courtesy of a duel. You give them the pressure that saves your own lines elsewhere. And then a message tears through the dust louder than a trumpet. Parmenian, pressed hard, asks for help. It is the question every commander hates. Chase the fugitive king and maybe end the war by sunset, or protect your left and make sure you still have an army in the morning. You choose the army. You pull the companions away from the intoxicating chase and wheel them left, like a shepherd who understands that a single wolf can undo a day of beautiful driving. You hit the Persian cavalry pressing Parmenion the way a hammer hits a nail out of alignment. The line jerks straight. Men who had already started telling themselves a story about your defeat swallow the words and begin a different story with the same mouths. Order reasserts itself. You look back once at the dust trail that holds the royal chariot and file the unfinished business in a drawer labeled Soon. When the sun leans toward evening, the field has chosen sides. The chariots are wreckage, the elephants cowed by noise and steel they haven't learned to fear properly yet, the Persian wings frayed, the Heerd Greek block thinned to a memory of neat ranks. You gather your men at a small rise and let them see what they accomplished. They don't need your speech, the ground talks. Even so, you give them the sentence you know they want. Not poetry, not arithmetic, only, "We did it," followed by the promises commanders always owe. Pay, rest, the chance to write home with ink that smells like pride. Night throws its cape over the dead and the living. You walk the lines with a cup you don't drink from. Speak each name you must. Let your voice rest where it should, on men who did small, hard things no poet notices. Somewhere beyond the dark, Darius rides with the nobles who still believe old ways can be made new by decree. He leaves behind more than tents and gold. He leaves the idea of invincibility, dented and dropped. He leaves the road to cities that once were the stuff of stories told under winter roofs. You will enter those names and make them places in your own story. You will be greeted at gates with palms and drums, with chained lions and caged joy, with priests who know how to turn a conqueror into a guest if the guest pays proper respect. You will sit on thrones built for men who measured time by their own ancestors' breath. You will taste a victory that is more than dust and blood, the weight of a seal pressed into wet clay, the click of locks opening not because you've smashed them, but because keys arrive on velvet. And with the doors opening outward, something else will start to creak inside. Triumph draws envy the way lamps draw moths. Old friends will stiffen when new customs find their way to your table. Men who swore to die for you will talk softer when you begin to look and sound like the king of kings you have defeated. Wealth multiplies choices. Choices multiply shadows. Your hardest fights won't all happen against men whose names end in dates or bazos. Because after Gaugamela, you don't only inherit Babylon and Susa, you inherit the problems that live inside victory. Courtiers with knives for tongues, loyalties that corrode in gold, and a rumor that says greatness is a ladder you climb until your foot finds only air. The gates are opening. Listen. That sound behind them is not just music. It's also the first faint click of trouble at home.
Babylon does not resist, it exhales. You approach under a sky the color of baked clay and watch the city's shoulders relax. The walls rise like horizons folded into brick, glazed beasts parade along polychrome gates, and the people pour into streets with palms and drums as if they've practiced welcoming conquerors and finally like the melody again. Mazaeus, satrap, shrewd as a merchant counting coin under the table, meets you with keys, humility, and a proposal. Let him keep the books if you keep the peace. You understand the language of survivors. You take his bow. Keep him in office. Set Macedonian eyes over Persian hands and send a message that ripples farther than any trumpet. We will rule with what works. You step through the Ishtar gate and time tilts. Lions strut blue and gold along walls that remember kings whose names taste like rain.
priests of Marduk approach with careful faces and old syllables. You return the god to his temple, swear oaths that sound strange in Macedonian mouths but right in Babylonian ears, and order repairs where Persian fear had once shut doors. You remit taxes arrears where they crush, lash cheats where they smirk, and put guards where greed wants them least. The city answers with lamps and music that swell at dusk, with markets that hum like hives, with the quiet that lets men plan. Then you open the treasuries. Wealth flows out like a river turned from a dam, bullion stacked in precise cubes, textiles heavy as promises, carved furniture that creaks under the weight of centuries. Pay chests fill, pay lines shorten. Soldiers who have marched through dust until their souls tasted chalk finally feel silver slide over their palms like water. You distribute with ceremony to keep envy quiet and discipline loud. The army glows without bursting into flame. East again, Susa next, a palace that wears silk in its stones, columns painted like gardens frozen mid-bloom, floors that ask for softened steps. Here, the treasure is older, deeper, almost sullen with accumulation. Your men's eyes widen the way men's eyes do when their children's children will live off what they carry away. You take what you need to keep the engine fed, inventory the rest the way Aristotle would have wanted a scholar to inventory butterflies, and then you do something that tastes like history rewriting itself. You sit on a throne where great kings sat, and the knees of older empires would have knocked. The courtiers shift their weight, measuring you in a currency they invented. You give them a conversion rate they can understand. Justice done quickly, salaries paid, commands given in crisp Greek and answered in clean, supervised Persian. You do not intend to be a tourist who leaves boot prints on carpets. You intend to inherit. You keep satraps who are competent, clip those who nibbled too boldly, and set scribes to verify everything. You accept petitions in Aramaic, commands in Greek, receipts in Elamite, the polyglot rhythm of a continent. You begin to wear a little of the place because power is also costume. A sash here, sleeves longer than Macedonia would call decent, the court's measured walk that signals you have time, even when you do not. Some of your companions raise an eyebrow. Others lower theirs and watch you when their back turns. You see it. You also see farther than their comfort. You put Persians in charge of Persians when they're the best for it, and you put Macedonians over them to make sure best doesn't go crooked. You marry your ambition to a policy of fusion. Children of soldiers learning to speak where they will live, settlers writing letters home about new streets and old gods, tax receipts printed in more than one script. It is a beautiful idea that leaks at the seams when whiskey nights run long. Intense, men whisper that you're changing. They mean you're leaving us. Some whisper with love, others with fear, a few with the strictness of men who think simplicity is the same as virtue. You walk the camps and breathe the smells you remember from Pella, leather and smoke, oil on bronze, wet wool after a sudden rain, and keep the army your own the way a rider keeps a horse that wants to test the bit. You increase pay in the right places. You call men by names learned long ago. You weep for the right dead, publicly and without theater, because you actually feel it. You honored Parmenion before you must face the future that will bruise both of your names. You hold banquets where Persians and Macedonians sit under the same roof and discover that strong drink is a universal language. But the map won't let you rest in palaces. North and east rises country that chews armies, Bactria and Sogdiana, hard syllables for hard land, gorges that swallow sound, rivers that bargain in flood, fortresses set like fists on cliffs, horse archers who learned to ride before they learned to walk, noble families who switch sides less from treachery than from a tradition of surviving. Darius flees toward them, toward men like Bessus, who call themselves saviors while sharpening knives behind their backs. You gather the files again. You fold the silks you were just learning to wear and stash them beneath armor that fits like a truth. You leave garrisons to keep Babylon's markets honest, Susa's stores counted, Persepolis' ash unharmed by scavengers, and you lead the army toward passes that make men wish for simple enemies and flat ground. You've become king of kings by taking the seat. Now you must prove you can sit on it without sliding. The desert will not flatter. The mountains will not care who your father was. The enemies ahead don't march in ranks to meet medals. They vanish when the sword swings and reappear when your back turns. And out there among cliffs that scrape the sky, a betrayal will rip the last thread of the old empire, and you'll have to decide whether justice is a sentence, a spectacle, or a standard to plant in stony soil. Because beyond the soft carpets of Babylon and the bright columns of Susa and the burned cedar of Persepolis, the road narrows into rock, and every step east asks the same question. Can you hold men together enough to weld an idea to a continent?
East is not a line on a map anymore. It is a landscape that eats plans. You ride into Bactria and Sogdiana, where the earth learns new ways to be hard. Plains that roll until they suddenly don't. Rivers that look fordable until they throw cold fists at your thighs. Cliffs that pretend to be sky. Darius is ahead of you, then beside you on Rumor's road, then gone. You find him at last not with a crown but on a cart, breathing like a man who has been betrayed by the very lungs that kept him king. Bessus, satrap, cousin, opportunist, has taken the title Artaxerxes and the knife, and in that order. You step down, lift Darius's head, and give him the respect he did not get from his own. You promise proper rights. Then you send a message that 1,000 mouths will carry. Kingship is not a coat you steal from a dead man's shoulders. It is a standard you earn by catching the thieves who tried. You turn the army into a net and cast it across the Oxus. The river is wide, brown, stubborn. You lash hides into boats, bind reeds into rafts, ferry horses that hate the rocking and men who hate the delay. On the far bank, the world rearranges its tricks. Bessus slips, reappears, slips again, sold out by allies who decide his usefulness is a shorter road than his promises. You take him alive, and justice takes its time. He is paraded, marked, and sent to the old heartlands for finishing, punishment in a dialect Persia understands. The message turns from thunder into ground note. The old empire is not merely broken, it has been judged. Now the real work begins, the kind that counts more on cold than on glory. Bactria and Sogdiana do not gather into one battle the way plains farther west allowed. They unravel you into a dozen fights that never ask permission to start. You build forts like stitches, Herat, Artaquana, farther north along the Oxus and Jaxartes, so when the cloth tears, it stops at your thread. You leave garrisons of men who know they will be wintering without you and pay them like you mean it, because confidence is a supply as real as barley. In the middle of all this, your camp learns a new kind of silence. Word sweeps under canvas like a wind on a bad day. Philotas, son of Parmenion, is accused of plotting, of letting a whisper about your life slip past his duty to grab it by the throat. You listen, test, push. His answers land wrong. You convene the army's court, because a king's justice must be seen to be more than a king's mood. The sentence comes down like iron. Philotas meets it. In Ecbatana, messengers fly faster than regret to reach Parmenion. Old lion, once your father's right hand, then yours. You weigh danger against gratitude and choose the army over the men who taught half of it how to stand. A blade does a job you hate. The camp breathes again, but differently. Loyalty holds, narrower, tighter. You walk the lines longer those nights, not to explain. Explanations scatter, but to be seen. Your enemies read the new ache and press. Spitaminis rises in Sogdiana like a desert wind. Now ally, now ember, now blaze. He cuts a column of your men to pieces near Maraconda. The story gallops ahead of him and tries to reach your camp before he does. You turn your anger into geometry. Detachments under Crateros and Koinos, feints and crossings, cordons that squeeze. Spitaminis keeps slipping, keeps burning, keeps turning friends into fuel until even his Scythian partners grow tired of being tinder. They send his head to you in a sack, a rough punctuation mark at the end of a hard sentence. North of Maracanda, the Jaxartes, you will call it the Tanais when you want the world to hear Greek, runs cold and quick. Scythian riders on the far bank circle like hawks that have learned to laugh. You let them watch you build bridges until their patience thinks you are slow. Then you spring the trap. Catapults hurl bolts across water to thin their confidence. Like troops slip over first to anchor a bite, the cavalry pours through the hole and turns watching into running. On the far bank, under a sky that has never cared whom rules the world, you found a city with a name that says what you mean. Alexandria Escate, the farthest. A Greek word driven into a soil that will test whether words can take root in wind. Then there are the rocks. Not the polite kind that line fields, but walls of stone with thunderheads for hats. The Sogdian rock rises sheer, smug with height. Oxyartes, a noble with more intelligence than mercy for his enemies, thinks cliffs are kings better than you. His daughter moves behind those walls with a lantern sometimes. Men in your camp notice, without saying they noticed. You ride the perimeter and leave engineers to count angles. The defenders laugh and throw down a message. Men with wings could take this place. You turn to your file leaders and ask for volunteers who will climb where even goats file complaints. 300 step forward, because there are always 300 in any army. The ones who refuse maps.
Night. Ropes of flax, tent pegs for handholds jammed into cracks. A few fall, and the rope sings their end to the stones. Dawn comes, and those who didn't fall shape themselves into silhouettes along the summit. A herald bellows the line you wrote for him before the climb. There are men with wings! The laugh dies on the wall. Oxyartes changes his calculation. Gates open. You walk into a place that thought it would only ever cede to time. Inside, among startled faces and armed handmaidens, stands the woman whose lamp your sentries described without daring to say her name. Roxana. You look, not like a boy, but not like a judge either. You file the sight away where important things wait for the right paragraph. The Oxyartes quartering becomes policy. You take hostages gently, keep promises loudly, and tie knots with people's pride instead of only with their wrists. You adopt into your command men who, last year, would have put arrows through you before breakfast. You insist on training that ignores birth and honors competence. You still post Macedonians where ambition could get mischievous. Half the art is punishment that does not sour the well. The other half is reward that does not rot the barrel. You promote locals. You plant settlers. You cut roads like veins through country that has only known capillaries. Day by day, the army learns to fight out of sight of itself. Columns feeling for each other across ridges and rivers. You discover that a hard march is worth more than a hard speech. You also discover that winter in Sogdiana respects no man's schedule. You lose toes and tempers to ice and to the lies of the horizon. You recover them with the oldest cure there is, shared risk. You ride in front where the wind makes teeth chatter. Eat what the men eat when the supply train limps. Sleep on ground that remembers no king's name. Word of that moves faster than proclamations. In the quiet hours after a raid, you study the faces of your officers in firelight. Craterus, who loves the old ways as if they were a person. Hephaestion, who reads your mind without trying to control it. Coenus, blunt, whose honesty removes splinters you didn't know were there. Perdicus, quick to move. Polyperchon, slow to promise. They are men, and therefore not statues. They will break, shine, disappoint, and save. You keep them anyway because there is no second army waiting in a closet. The fusing you dreamed in Susa and began to practice here draws its first clear breath. You form new units from Persian boys, Epigony, the successors, and teach them files, pace, the Macedonian way to turn fear into forward motion. Some of your old guard scowled deep enough to cast shade. We won the world, they think, and now the world is being asked to fight beside us like equals. You hear it and keep going because you also hear something larger, the sound of an empire learning the word we. Up on another rock, Coriene's stronghold this time, your men climb again, bargaining with cliffs for a place to stand. Down in another river valley, engineers throw another bridge over another stream that thinks it can stop new ideas. You begin to feel the campaign as a pulse rather than a schedule. Surge, hold, build, surge again. Resistance doesn't end, it drains. Your enemies learn that forests of spears can grow even in lands that prefer bows on horseback. Your friends learn that your promises, tedious and practical, actually come true. When the last fires in Sogdiana turn from rebellion to cooking, you breathe out for the first time in months without tasting ash. The army is thinner, tempered, suspicious in places where suspicion can be healthy, raw in others where rawness will need balm. You ride back through camps that now smell of cumin and wine, goat stew and barley bread, languages stepping over one another without bumping too hard. You have held the line against the land and the men who use it like a weapon. You have also held your idea against the habits of your own. And then, at a feast where the air feels less like a knife and more like a robe, you look again at the woman whose silhouette first sharpened against a cliff's edge. Fate is not a word you throw around, but policy can choose to wear a face. The next move will be both, a marriage that ties your name to the hills you just taught to say it, and then a larger marriage to follow. Rows of rings traded in a palace far from here, a ceremony that tries to braid two worlds with vows instead of spear points. Because the rocks have yielded and the rivers have learned your footstep, but the harder campaign is ahead, winning hearts without breaking backs.
Susa smells like cedar and warm honey when you return. A palace laid out like a long promise, columns painted the color of late fruit, carpets that teach feet not to hurry. You've come not to count treasure, but to count vows. Years ago in Bactria, you chose one marriage, Roxana, a knot tied to a mountain and to a people who needed their names spoken in your house. Now you mean to make the room bigger. If the empire is going to be one thing, it has to learn to breathe with both lungs. You announce it simply, the way a commander gives an order that is already marched halfway to completion. A common wedding. Not a private ceremony in a quiet courtyard, but a hall of couples under one roof, one day, one table. The list unrolls. You will take Statara, Darius's daughter, and Parisades, daughter of Artaxerxes, names that used to sign pay orders against you, now to be said at your table. Hephaestion will take Drupitus, Statara's sister, so that your closest friend is stitched to you by bonds even gossip can't untie. Around you, 80-odd nobles from Macedonia pair with Persian women of high houses, and beyond the glittering circle, thousands of rank-and-file soldiers who have taken Asian wives are called forward to have those unions written down and blessed with pay and gifts. You pay the dowries yourself. You're not buying devotion. You're funding a future that needs paperwork to stand. The hall becomes a map. Persian musicians pluck strings that sound like moonlight. Macedonian pipes answer with a sturdy tune that knows roads. Priests speak names in many languages, and the air smooths their edges into one breath. You sit on a high seat, not to loom, but to be seen. Because policy only becomes real when it has a face men can point to. The bride's veils move like small waves. The groom's armor gleams like intention. Wine goes around in measured cups. To each couple, you give a gift that is part coin and part sentence. You belong. The scribes keep pace, scratching names onto rolls that will decide rations, rights, inheritances, and the 1,000 practical things that turn a word like fusion into poetry, into bread. Not everyone smiles the same smile. Some Macedonians look at the bracelets and the sleeves and the bowing and feel their backs itch. They fought for you when your cloak was still the rough wool of Pella. Now you wear robes that whisper when you move and keep Persian hours that make men wonder if the sun has changed sides. They will drink the wine and then, intense, lit like small moons, ask each other whether greatness is a road that leaves the old milestones behind forever. They are not wrong to worry. You hear them, even when they don't move their lips. But you keep going, because the math is simple. An empire is not a camp that can pull its tents at dawn. It is a city of cities, a table with more than one kind of bread. You set up training for the epigony, the successors, 30,000 Persian youths taught to carry the sarissa and step in file until their feet think like Macedonian feet. You promote Persians whose competence embarrasses lazy nobles of every stripe. You keep satraps who keep books straight and cut out those who treat provinces like lunch. You ask Greek to be the language of the orders and allow the provinces to answer in the tongues their mothers used when they set bones and sang lullabies. You let proskynesis, court obeisance, remain in Eastern custom among Easterners, and you do not demand it where it will taste like humiliation. You wear sleeves longer than yesterday, and you shorten them when your old guard needs to see forearms. At the wedding feast, you look for faces. Hephaestion, smiling that steady smile that tells you he is the hinge between your intent and the army's patience. Craterus, whose loyalty is iron, but whose love is for the ways of home. Ptolemy, already turning tonight into paragraphs for tomorrow. Seleucus, watchful. Nearchus, thinking ahead to ships. And beyond them, a row of Persian nobles whose eyes say, "We did not expect to be invited," and are still deciding whether we should be grateful or only careful. You give the room the one gift no treasurer can count: time spent among them with no hurry in your voice. The morning after the music stops, you turn the ceremony into policy. Mixed units are posted to mixed provinces. Inspectors make sure a bride's dowry reaches her hands and not the fist of an officer with sticky fingers. You order baby names recorded so the roles of tomorrow's soldiers can begin to exist today. When disputes rise, property, inheritance, the old enmity between custom and law, you create seats where Greek practice and Persian tradition must sit and argue until they find a shared chair. This is not romance. It is carpentry. You are building a frame strong enough to carry families who will never meet you.
Then the bill comes due. At Opus on the Tigris, you call the army to assembly with the firmness of a father who has decided which sons must go and which must stay. The old men, the wounded, the worn, you release them with gifts rich enough to make news, crowns of gold for those who deserve to glitter when they go home. At the same time, you enroll Persian units in the corps, Call them kinsmen. Put them in white, a color that says, here is honor, not just auxiliary labor. Your voice says we, and a slice of your Macedonians hears they. Murmur becomes thunder. Insults turn from private breath to public sound. Some shout what many think. You are replacing them with strangers, loving new ways more than old faces. The heat in the air is not a bonfire, not yet. It is a dozen small coals that could become one if the wind cooperates. You do not blink. You arrest ringleaders with the speed that makes hesitation irrelevant. You dismiss the entire assembly. All of you go, as if you were sending an ungrateful household out into the night. You seat Persian guards around you, not to provoke, but to place punctuation after a sentence that men must read. This policy will stand. Then you do the other half of leadership. You let the army come back. Delegations crawl under the tent flap, faces honest or rehearsed, repentance, fear, duty, all wearing the same clothes. You take them in again without smallness. You reseat the Macedonians in your heart where they always were and make sure they see it. And then you stage a feast that tells the story more clearly than a proclamation. 9,000 men dining under the same sky, libations poured to gods with different names for the same light, prayers spoken in more than one language without the room breaking. The banquet at Opus is a rehearsal dinner for the marriage you want the empire to have with itself. Even so, the human heart keeps its own ledger. Some will never love the sleeves. Some will never quite forgive Statira for wearing your ring beside Roxana. Some will whisper that when you kneel before Ammon or accept Persian homage, you are forgetting where you started. Others, Persians who felt themselves conquered, will for the first time feel themselves citizens in a house that might make room for their grandchildren on the stairs. Policy is not a poem. It is a neighborhood. People quarrel. People borrow salt. People remember who shoveled their doorway in last winter's storm. In Susa, you hand out one more gift, names written in ledgers that outlive the candles. Then you ride again, because policy needs miles to become custom. The route leads you back toward Babylon, where planners sharpen reed pens over a new campaign, south toward Arabia's coasts. The Navy trains on the Euphrates, shipwrights measure keels with twine and optimism, and Nearchus tells you where the sea will humiliate pride, and where it might reward patience. It feels for a moment like the future is endless. More maps, more cities, more carefully tied knots, more banquets where strangers learn to sing each other's songs. But long tables don't only serve food, they also serve silence, the kind that drops when someone's chair is suddenly empty. Before you can march on the next horizon, loss will walk into your tent wearing the soft sandals of a friend, and the balance you have been building between old and new will wobble on one missing stone. Because the weddings at Susa were the sound of a house expanding, but the house is about to mourn, and grief, even for kings, throws shadows that policy can't measure.